And we are live. Welcome to Olivia's Stories, ladies and gentlemen. Story number 1.
It's crazy how life can be sometimes. Not so long ago, I was excited about being married and also marrying the girl of my dreams. I was that guy that people called a loser back in high school, and she was the cool girl that hung out with the cool kids. I saw her from afar, and I was hooked, and so in love with her. She was a gorgeous blondie who looked like Barbie. And after high school, I got a scholarship to USC, though I didn't need a scholarship because my father was rich and he owned a couple of properties. But I got a scholarship because of my academic straight A's on my high school diploma. My father passed away when I was still in college and left me with all his businesses since I was the only son and child he had. I wanted to finish with my studies, so I became a shadow owner and have someone work for me while I work on my dreams. I hate a flashy lifestyle. I like being ordinary. Can you imagine an ordinary rich man? I learned that from my dad. He once said, "Son, a wealthy man isn't a consumer, but an investor," meaning accumulate more assets than liabilities, and that is how you stay on top of your game. I'm proud to say I walked in his footsteps. After some time, my mom fell in love with my stepdad, who is also the guy who works for me. Well, he used to be my father's right-hand man, but now he is my mother's husband. How unbelievable, in a twist of tables. I'm glad my father left everything to me, but I'm also glad my mom found happiness, because my mother had been miserable and depressed for the whole 2 years after my father's passing. I have nothing against my stepdad, and he is actually a very cool guy who taught me a lot about self-development. I'm now fit and healthy. I jog and also work out. That's how I attracted my ex-wife. Life after high school was not that great at all for her. She had failed high school. Luckily, she got a job and was working at the nearest coffee shop. Mom used to say she's bad news, but I didn't listen. She's the lover of things in class. She loves buying expensive clothes. I should have known better, but I was naive. Before my mom passed, we had a delightful conversation, and she said I mustn't marry her, and also I mustn't tell her about the family business she didn't trust. I didn't understand why, because she appeared to be a very good and humble girl. But I guess when they said love is blind, they were not telling lies. I, male 27, met my ex-wife, female 26, at Moneo Cafe where she worked well. We knew each other since high school, but we never talked to each other nor crossed paths. So I was having breakfast at the cafe when she came and served me coffee. I was surprised when she called me by name. We never spoke in high school, so I didn't think she would remember my name. But I guess things changed. We started talking and she asked me what I did. I was an IT specialist. I didn't tell her everything. I kept some things to myself. She asked me if we could hang out sometimes. I was like, sure, trust me. What was like a dream come true? Because I had wanted her in high school, but she was one of those popular girls, so I saw that I was not her type. I didn't even ask her out. She was the one who asked me out. My old feelings for her started to reappear. I should have seen that this was a trap, but I was drunk in love, I think. In my eyes, she was brave for asking a guy out. I wouldn't say much as she was still beautiful. We started to hang around, and I even introduced her to my mom when my mom came by the house in New Jersey. My mom moved out when my dad passed away to California, where my dad's businesses reside the most, and that is where she started seeing my stepdad. We got married a year later into our relationship right after my mom's funeral. I didn't want to be alone, and also I was tired of funerals within the family, so I took our relationship to the next step. My mom's final words are still ringing in my ear ever since we got married. I had never told her anything about the family business. I had a trust issue. I did want to tell her, but she needed to earn my trust and prove my mother wrong. And also we had a prenup marriage, meaning what hers is hers and what's mine is mine. She had a problem with it before, but I convinced her otherwise. We moved to Pasadena, California. After our wedding, I had to be close to my businesses. I told my ex-wife that we have to move to California for a fresh start and new life. Things suddenly changed when I said I have resigned as an IT specialist. I wanted to start my own business creating an AI software that's futuristic. I sold the house in New Jersey, and also the cars flew to California and went to Pasadena, where I bought a new beautiful house and a nice Volvo SUV. On weekends, we went to the La Villa Loca Lodge where my stepdad lived, as he is now taking care of that establishment, so my ex-wife thought it was my stepdad's place. So far, she was failing the test. She thought I didn't see the light flirt she would pull with my stepdad. My software business wasn't going well at all. I was failing. It was my first time starting a business from scratch, so they were still L's I had to take as there were a lot of things I had to learn. When my ex-wife saw that my business was failing, she said I should quit and go work for my stepdad. I was annoyed that she didn't even support me. She started nagging me ever since I started making losses. The nerve she had, she even went to put out a word to my stepdad in private telling him that my business was failing. I needed help. My stepdad was surprised that my wife doesn't know how wealthy I am because he came to tell me that my wife went to see him and to put a word on my behalf. My ex-wife was starting to spend money recklessly. She was starting to drink wine every day. Funny how she went back to being that girl from high school. It was like I was her breakthrough or her ticket back to her old self. She didn't even know how to clean the house. She only cared about herself. She started driving herself to the villa before the weekend. As fit as I am still that humble, nice guy. And since my stepdad was all alone, he'll probably need some company. That was what I thought when I allowed her to go to the villa before me. She was practically family, and also, she loved the mansion. Her words. I was swamped with work trying to figure out a new marketing strategy for my business when I got a call from my uncle telling me to come to the villa. I thought it was something urgent, but it was a problem concerning my ex-wife. She was intoxicated and apparently had a blackout and hit her head. She was unconscious. My stepdad was also too intoxicated to drive her to the hospital. Can you believe it? I thought she had found herself a drinking buddy. I was starting to be suspicious that there was more to this than just drinking alcohol together. But I couldn't let that distract me from my goals, so I let it slide. When we came back home from the hospital, she was sorry, and she even tried making it up for it. I didn't want to talk to her, so I gave her the silent treatment. Well, it only went on for a couple of days. Then we went back to our normal lives. She once told me that she was looking for a job as a model. She was starting to chase her dreams, but the habit of drinking came back. She realized it's not easy to chase your dreams as she quit after 4 attempts and went back to the red wine. We decided that we would move to the lodge and rent out the house we were living in. She was excited, and I haven't seen that side of hers in a long time. My software business started picking up. I was usually busy in and out of meetings. That's why we moved to the villa so my stepdad would keep an eye on her. I bought an apartment in San Francisco and also set up an office there for my geek team. My stepdad and ex-wife were usually alone. I sometimes have vivid thoughts about them. But my stepdad was way too old, although he exercised and his body was still in perfect shape. I never thought he would do me dirty. Well, both him and my wife. I once went to the villa without telling them that I was coming. It was surprising what I saw. They were sitting in the dining room looking at each other like they were husband and wife. They didn't even notice I was there. The way my stepdad looked at my wife made me sick, and the way she looked at him was more sickening. I couldn't stand it, so I decided to burst their little love bubble by making them notice that they were not alone. We ate dinner silently that night. After that, we went to bed. She was acting differently. She was all shy and quiet. It was awkward. It felt like we were distant, yet in the same bed. I knew from that day that something was really going on between the two, but I couldn't figure it out. I had a surprise for my ex-wife that day, but I decided to put that on hold. As I had developed trust issues, I couldn't just tell her the good news that I had when I felt the bad energy in my lodge. My stepdad was also acting up. I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The following day, they tried acting up like everything was fine and said they were just surprised I had showed up. But they didn't look surprised to me. It was more like a spoiler alert, you know. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't pretend like I didn't suspect or see that something was going on between them, so I just left the house. I asked my ex-wife to come with me so she'll see San Francisco and told her that she'll come back with me to the villa. I was separating them for a reason. I wasn't comfortable with her living alone with my stepdad. She was hesitant at first, but eventually gave in. She stayed in San Francisco for only 2 days before she hit me with the "we need to talk." I thought she was going to confess about her abomination with my stepdad. But instead, she didn't even talk. She just hit me with the words, "I want a divorce. It is not working." I couldn't believe it. You know, I was surprised and shocked. I mean, I had thought she was going to tell me what I needed to hear, but she just decided to pack her suitcase. I couldn't stop her, so I just watched her doing the packing. After she was done with her packing, she sat down on the edge of the bed and told me that she was not feeling me anymore. so it was better that we went our separate ways and that she had found someone who satisfied her and had time for her. My conscience was ready for the revelation, but my heart was not. I was so livid, I wanted to choke her so badly, and then she apologized, which infuriated me more because she had made me a fool and thought she would just say the stupid apology word and everything would be fine. I told myself that she didn't know me. She wouldn't toy with my feelings like that and think she would just apologize and get away with it. So as I got up, she ran for the door, dragging her suitcase. I guess she was intimidated by how furious I was. She stood by the door and told me to expect separation documents soon. Those words still haunt me till this day. I couldn't believe it. Was I not a man enough for her to do me dirt like this? Weeks passed without me going to the villa. I was angry at my ex-wife and my stepdad for having an affair, though I didn't have enough proof that they were indeed having an affair, but my conscience never lies. And deep down I knew this would happen somehow, my ex-wife having an affair. But I didn't think that it would have been with my stepdad. I admired him for his character and also for putting a smile on my mom's face when my dad passed away, but I never thought he would do what he did to me, which made me think that maybe he had also done it to my dad with my mom. Or was I exaggerating a bit? The anger I had grew more as I had thoughts that maybe he had also done what he did with my mom. I mean, how you would explain him not getting married for a long time until he married my mother. Yes, it didn't make sense on how and why would he betray someone who gave him a job like that. My mother was also not a saint, so in my head, everything I was trying to connect did connect. I couldn't allow my stepdad to get away with everything, especially since my father's passing was not clear, and his relationship with my mother started not long after my father had passed on. Something didn't add up, so I opted to do my own investigation to get to the bottom of everything. If he did this with my wife only, I would understand and leave things as they were because it was actually something I had expected from my ex-wife, but the fact that he married my mother also, meaning he did it to my father, which might have been the reason why we lost him. The wicked man knew a lot more than I did, and I had to find out what that was. A month passed and I was still staying at the lodge. I had hoped that maybe Stacy, my wife, would come back to her senses, but she proved me otherwise. Not that I was surprised, but I thought she loved me just like how I loved her uneducated ass. I should have known that she would do that. I mean, they say old habits die hard, right? And I thought she had changed from the Stacy I went to school with. Was I that naive to think that she would change? The reason why I had been ignorant about her old habits was because I really had hope. I thought she was going to realize that her habits were not good and change, I loved her. Well, I loved her since high school. But that time she was rolling with other cool kids who were on her level, and I was the nerd that didn't fit in her world. So I stayed with the crush I had, up until the day I saw her and made her my girl. I had thought she had become a humble lady, but I thought wrong. 1 week later, I had managed to get the best private investigator who would be able to help me in digging more evidence and information about my stepdad. My guts kept telling me that there was something that my stepdad knew more than that I could have let on. So an investigation done by the best investigator was going to be my ticket to know everything I needed to know. I believed that once I was done with my stepdad, I would make sure he suffers before kicking him out of the villa. I allowed them to enjoy their little love nest in my villa until I had gathered enough of what I wanted to know. I kept monitoring their phones without them knowing, of course. I had seen that my stepdad had been living the best life with Stacy in my villa. Well, my father had left him some money also when he died as his trusted right hand. But I was not about to let him enjoy my father's hard work for free. Not while there was a possibility that he had betrayed my father by stabbing him in the back. Then took his wife, not long after we had buried him. As much as I was blaming my stepdad for whatever that he did. But I also put the blame on Mom because had she not entertained my father's right-hand man, surely my father would have been alive maybe. No one knew what caused my father's death, and it was just sudden. I had thought I knew my mother, but she was also a villain in all the things that had happened in our family. Unfortunately, she had decided to take her easy way out before I even found out the truth. One thing I was grateful for that my mother had done was that she didn't forget to remind to be careful of Stacy. She warned me a lot of times, but I was clouded by love and thought she was nothing like the person my mother had known. I had thought life had humbled her and she had changed. But that wasn't true. Instead, I got the highest level and second season of who the real Stacy was. I should have seen through her when she was the one who asked me to take her out, that I was trapping myself in a worst possible way. Throughout my investigation, with the help of the private investigator, of course, I found out that my stepdad and my father were into illegal businesses also, but my stepdad was the one operating everything because my father didn't want to tint his name and use the stepdad for his illegal business. I couldn't believe that my father had a shady business on the side. I had thought he was an honest man, but my thoughts were always wrong, and it angered me that I knew nothing about the business he was doing on the side. No wonder my stepdad was always at the villa. Even when my father was away on a business trip, he would come home more often, saying he came to make sure that we were okay since my father was away. I should have known that his often checkups were actually to see my mother, not the other way around. Was I that stupid to even put two and two together to figure out what was happening at home right under my nose? As the investigation continued, I found out that my father found out that my stepdad was having an affair with my mother, but he found that out 2 days before he passed on. That didn't make any sense to me because he would have confronted them both, my stepdad and my mother, the day he found out about the affair, but he kept quiet. There was really more to whatever that was, so I dug more deeper, and I found out that my stepdad had a history that he was dating young girls, and what he did to me, having an affair with my wife, was not the first time he did it, meaning my stepdad was a homewrecker. I don't know if men are called homewreckers, but he was, and not only a homewrecker, but he was dating young girls, and I was the proof of that. I don't know why I found that disgusting, because it was. But there was this one intriguing evidence that I found, and it made me happy that I had discovered it. I was able to bring my father's death to justice. Even though they had said he died in his sleep due to stress pressure, he had. That does not make any sense, right? I just couldn't believe it because I had trusted my stepdad with my father's assets until I was mature enough to take over. So in my findings, I found out that my father had passed on due to suffocation, meaning someone had suffocated him to death, and that happened 2 days after my father had found out that my mother and my stepdad were having an affair. And in those 2 days, my father had an altercation with my stepdad, because he had found out that my stepdad was two-timing him on the illegal business side, plus my mother and stepdad had planned to scam my father off his businesses. How wicked was that? It was evident that my mother had a hand in my father's passing. I hated him even though she is no more, but what he did to my father was cruel and greedy. I mean, why would you look at your son suffering because of his father's passing while knowing that you had a hand in it? My stepdad was not his first time making women betray their husbands, because the evidence showed that he once did it to another businessman who trusted him. He got into a relationship with the wife only for him to use the wife for his dark desires. Once the husband found out that he was planning on scamming him, he sent authorities to arrest him. When my father found him, he was out of jail after being imprisoned for 5 years. I think my father was also a dumbass, because how can a smart person trust a jailbird? And the worst part is introducing him to your family as your right-hand man. My father was kind-hearted. He thought he was giving my stepdad another opportunity to find himself. But old habits die hard, right? My father didn't see it coming. I wondered if he didn't do any thorough investigation on him before introducing him to us. So he also used my mother for his own greed and selfishness. Another thing I found out was that my so-called wife was actually a body seller. She was working at the cafe as a day job. She owned an OnlyFans account where she was getting all nasty and freaky with old people who were lonely, so they paid her for her nasty videos. I was really disgusted and disappointed because though she was a forward girl at school, her parents were afforded. I wondered why she would resort to selling her body. The worst part of one of her videos was seen on Twitter. Imagine. Why was I so blind? All the information that I had got really infuriated me. I wanted to avenge my father and myself. I couldn't allow them to get away with everything. What infuriated me more was that I had been a fool the whole time, because my own mother knew what my stepdad was capable of and agreed to perform such a facade with him so that they could get my father's riches. On the other hand, Stacy made me fall in love with her and made her my wife only for her to make a fool out of me and perform an abomination with my stepdad. All for what? For riches that were not even his. I continued monitoring all their steps without them knowing, of course. My plan was to destroy both my ex-wife and my stepdad. How I wished my mother was also still alive so I would destroy 3 birds with 1 stone. But do you think my stepdad would have gotten into a relationship with my wife if my mother was still alive? Everything was confusing. Time passed, and I had gained enough strength and courage to face my backstabbers, and I was in a mix of anger, sorrow, and disappointment. I was disappointed with my parents and my wife. I had thought my wife was going to prove my mother wrong, but she did exactly as my mother had warned me about. I married Stacy not knowing anything about her parents. I have never even met them, and she never talked about them. I was floating in my love bubble, and I didn't mind many things, which were very important. I should have asked her or checked her background, but I didn't. And the thing I found during my investigation was that her parents had disowned her because she was not just a rebellious child, but she trended on social media advertising her nudity and freaky acts. Plus, she had a history of getting into a relationship with a married man who was her father's associate, which led to his wife finding out, and unfortunately, the wife, Stacy's father's associate, couldn't make it. Also, her mother passed on due to heart attack, which was triggered by the video of Stacy doing nasty acts on social media. That led to her father disowning her. Was I that ignorant? And I gathered all the information and asked the private investigator to send me Stacy's videos. You know, when you are driven by anger and hunger of revenge, you do anything to ease your conscience. I couldn't allow them to scam me like they did to their past. So I took all the information and took it to the authorities, but before that, I called a meeting in my father's business that he had left me, and that was run by my stepdad when I was still at school. I met with all the shareholders and told them that my stepdad was stepping down, meaning I would be the one in charge. Obviously, it was not easy having to make my stepdad step down on his position, but I had to show him the evidence that I had gathered and told him that I would put it on the press and the authorities. Then I asked him to sign all his rights that my father had given them to me. He was livid and told me that I would regret everything that I had done and I would miss him. One thing about me is that I would rather be alone than be with backstabbers. A week after, I contacted my lawyer regarding the divorce and made it quick, and it was a great fortune that we weren't married in a community of property. I had delayed the divorce process so I would be able to gather the evidence that I had found. After I had signed the papers, I went to the villa and asked them to pack everything that had belonged to them and move out. Stacy threw fits and insults and told me that I had no right to chase them out of the villa because it was not mine, but my stepdad's. I couldn't believe it, so my stepdad had told her that he owned the villa, fully knowing that I was the owner of it. No wonder Stacy left me for him. She fell for his lies. I just told them that they had only a week to pack everything that had belonged to them and move out. A few days later, my stepdad once called me asking for forgiveness and also pleading with me to not kick him out of the villa. Surely he thought I was still that naive small boy, so I just told him that I had nothing else to say to both him and Stacy. A week passed. I saw no movement of them moving out, so I went to the authorities and told them to accompany me to kick people out of my villa and gave them the information I had gathered about my stepdad. When we got there, I found them arguing. Stacy didn't want to move out, and my uncle's accounts were blocked. Nothing was said to anyone, and the authorities did their job and arrested my stepdad for all the things that he had done. I mean, nothing stays in the dark forever, right? A few days after my stepdad got arrested, Stacy came back and tried to apologize for all the things she had done. She came back telling me that she was pregnant with my stepdad's child and she had nowhere else to go, meaning she wanted me to take her back to the villa because she told me that she didn't know that I had owned the villa. She thought it was my stepdad's. I told her to go back to her father's house, but she threw tantrums. It surprised me to know that my ex-wife was actually a very selfish person. She never thought of anyone but herself and what was best for her. To even think that all the signals were there, but I didn't pay attention to them. The only thing that I had paid attention to was my father's business and assets, making sure that I made him proud. I also blame myself for what happened between Stacy and I. Yes, I was not supposed to tell her about my father's businesses, and I didn't, which was one thing that I had done well. But when it comes to giving my wife attention she needed, I failed dismally. For a couple of weeks, Stacy went onto social media and tried to drag my name into the mud. Luckily, I managed to get her to delete all the nasty things she had said about me. I had to threaten her that I would realize her nude pictures and nasty videos that she was doing for the old married men. She was not over the fact that I had arrested my stepdad. She hated me, and the feeling was mutual. I mean, she made me believe that she loved me for me and not for what I was offering. I decided to sell the villa because it had a lot of memories, good and bad. As much as my father loved it and trusted me to take good care of it, I had to let it go so that I would be able to start my life afresh and create new memories. The villa held a lot, from my childhood to my father passing on in mysterious ways in his sleep. I lived in the villa and worked with my stepdad to take out my father so they could take ownership or live there happily ever after in my villa. A lot had happened, so it was time to let it go. I had enough money to buy me another villa. Though it was not easy letting go of all your good and bad memories, it was going to depress me. 8 months later, I bumped into Stacy again. I had even forgotten about her. She didn't look very well. She was also heavily pregnant. I once heard someone say, "Life will humble you if you are not humble to it." And that was what was happening to Stacy. Life humbled her to a point that she stayed in one of the cheapest and unsafe apartments in San Diego. As much as she had done me bad, I couldn't allow her to continue staying there. If she was not pregnant, I was not going to help her, and that is the truth. Somehow I once loved her, and when I saw her in those apartments full of junkies, I thought about the goods my stepdad once did for me and my family. As much as his bad acts were way too many than his good deeds, I couldn't let the innocent child suffer. I was not doing it for my stepdad, but I was doing it to honor my father. He once trusted my stepdad, and he helped look after my father's businesses after he had passed on until I had grown enough to take over. So I took Stacy to a better and safer apartment. I asked her why she didn't want to go back to her father's house, and she told me that his father doesn't want her, and he had remarried an evil woman, meaning she once had tried going back home. After I had made sure that she had settled well and there were enough things that she would need, I gave her some rules and told her that if she ever breaks them, she was going to go back to San Diego and I would take the child to child social services. A month later, she gave birth to the cutest baby girl. I loved and still love children. I wished I had a small sibling, but God decided otherwise. Stacy didn't forget to nag me with eternal apologies and assured me that she had changed. Whatever she was doing it out of desperation. She was desperate to get a father figure and attention, which was why she resorted to getting into relationships with rich married men most of the time, because her own father never had time for her, but he had time for her other siblings. I wondered why she had never told me that. I was her husband, so I had a right to know. I know I had been a bad husband to her because I was busy chasing money and making sure that I did not let my father down because he had trusted me to continue with his legacy. I felt really bad that I was also the cause of her resorting to spending time with my stepdad. Not that I regretted putting my stepdad in jail. He deserved it, and everything that is still coming to him. But what I regret is punishing someone who wanted attention. Yes, I gave and showed her love, but never attention, and that made me feel like a jerk. I continued supporting my stepdad's child, and I vowed to myself that I will take good care of the child and be the father to her, but I was not going to get back with Stacy. A leopard doesn't change its spots, so if I were to take her back, how sure would I know that she won't repeat what she had done, and how would I ever forget the betrayal she once did? I don't know if I made a good decision for what I did. Do you guys think I handled everything well, or I should have done better?